Good day everyone, I am Rachel GUZMAN, and in this video I will tackle the process of translation. And without further ado, let's start. For the outline of my discussion, these will be the lessons I shall discuss. These lessons will help you amass ideas on the in-depth matters regarding the process of translation. And to begin, in the early 19th century, translation was regarded as a serious and practical matter for assisting a writer in discovering and forming their own native style. Similar of how it had been for centuries, there was a change in the status of translation with an increase amateur translators such as the British diplomats whose goal in translating was more to spread the information in a given work than to examine its formal qualities. Moreover, translation is referred to as art by scholars like Theodore Savery, who stated that the translation's meaning must reflect the original composition's originality and freshness, in that the translator's job is to choose the closest equivalent, and that the translator should have a broad knowledge of both source language and target language. As for the notion of Roger Bell, the translator is a communicator who needs to process information and text. Therefore, he or she needs procedural and factual knowledge. Hence, any effective exchange of information is said to depend on the communicator, making sure that the recipient understands his or her informative intention, which is accomplished by making the stimulus, such as the words, gestures, and so on, as relevant as possible to the point where the recipient can expect to derive adequate contextual effects without exerting unnecessary efforts. In light of this, the communicator provides the listener with communicative cues that enable inference. For their part, translators are in a similar position and are responsible for a number of tasks, such as they must determine whether and how to convey the informative intention, whether to translate descriptively or interpretively the text, and the other issues. These choices are based on the translator's assessment of the receiver's cognitive environment. For a translation to be successful, both the translator and the receiver must hold the same fundamental beliefs about how similarity being sought, and the translator's intention must line up also with the receiver's expectations. And at this juncture, I will discuss the cognitive process of translation, which involves both the translator and the receiver, and how their respective thoughts and beliefs interact to form a successful translation. The cognitive process of translation is a complex one, involving a delicate balancing act between beliefs and thoughts of the translator and also the receiver. The translator must be able to navigate between their own beliefs and the expectations of the receiver in order to produce a successful translation. In order to achieve this, the translator must be aware of their own subjectivity and the biases they bring to a text. And this can be difficult process as the translator must also ensure that their translation accurately reflects the original text and captures its meaning in an appropriate way. Having said those, there is a three-stage process of interpretative model anchored by Danica Siliskovic and Marian Lever. The first process is reading and understanding, which involves becoming familiar with the context and cultural nuances in which the text was written and understanding the meaning of the words in their cultural implications. In this stage, using linguistic competence and world knowledge grasps the sense of source text. The second process is the verbalization, where the interpreter and also the one that is translating builds mental bridges between the source language and the target language. In addition, This is an essential intermediate phase if the translator avoids transcoding and calques, and when attempting to produce an effective translation. The verbalization requires the interpreter to transform the source text into general, conceptually meaningful chunks of information, which can be expressed in a different language. And the third process is re-expression, where the target text is constituted and given form based on the deverbalized understanding of sense. Re-expression must also take into consideration such as the cultural and contextual differences between the source language and the target language, as well as the stylistic preferences, so that a faithful translation of the original text is produced. Therefore, for the translator to be able to produce an effective translation, it needs to undergo a cognitive process of translation, which includes the three processes such as the sense of reading and understanding, the deverbalization, and the re-expression. And to elaborate on how to translate, I will discuss Eugene Nida's three-stage system of translation. But first and foremost, the first thing to keep in mind in the recoding and decoding is that the process of translation must accept that although translation has a central core of linguistic activity, it belongs most properly to semiotics. When you say semiotics, it is a science that studies sign systems, structures, sign processes, and sign functions. In view of semiotics, translation is studied as a purely semiotic act that involves the transition from one system to another. In Eugene Nida's model, it emphasizes the scientific and practical advantages when it comes to translation. And it has stages or processes. First is we have the source language, or the language to be translated into target language. Next is the analysis, or the process of analysis means that the translator should have a deep understanding of both source language and the target language. At this stage, our linguistic capability to correctly interpret and understand the source language text is highly needed. Our knowledge on the subject matter will also support our work at this stage. To also note, one of the challenges that translator may encounter at this initial step is perhaps the lack of clarity in the source language text, and also the issue of untranslatability, or the issue when there is no lexical and syntactical substitute in the target language for an SL item or a source language item. And to move on the next process is we have the restructuring, or this stage can also be regarded as an editing stage that involves decision making. At this stage, we will need to decide which equivalent to use or which text is the most suitable to be used in the translation. And lastly is we have the target language, or also called as the receptor language. This is the product of the translation. And to understand more the process of translation, let's take a look at this sample. As you can see, the source text is in English language, and the word is hello. In the stage of analysis, a translator should know its meaning, and that is linked semantically. Hence, in the case of translating English word hello into French, the French language makes a distinction, unlike English that does not distinguish the use of hello through face-to-face interaction and the use of it when it comes to answering through telephone. In French, there are different usage of words when it comes to greeting, such as in face-to-face or through telephone. Therefore, the translator's first task is to extract the core meaning of the term in order to transfer it. And also, this stage is associated with the cognitive process of translation. And now, as it arrives to restructuring process, the word hello will be thoroughly analyzed. As a result, the notion of greeting has been isolated, and the word hello has been replaced by a phrase carrying the same notion. Hence, the critical point of translating is that the translator should also consider other criteria, such as the existence of the stylistic function of stringing affirmatives, the social context of greeting, whether telephonic or face-to-face, the class position, the status of the speakers, and the resultant weight of a colloquial greeting in different societies. Like I said, that French language makes a distinction depending to context and its setting. And lastly, it arrives at its target language, resulting to the phrase "kava," which means "how's your day going?" In this case, the translation is not literal as you observe because the translator considered the variety of situations. Hence, "kava" is a common day-to-day phrase in a casual conversation. And for a summary, the proponents Taylor Savory and Roger Bell emphasized the importance of four main elements for successful translation, such as the source language, the translator, strategies and decision to be used in the process, and lastly, which is the target language. As part of the process, Savory and Bell encouraged the translators to think thoroughly of their decisions. Hence, in a cognitive view, translators must choose the best approach to make sure that their translation will result in the most accurate outcome. And also with the guide of these three stages of the interpretive model of translation by Danica Seliskovic and Marian Lederer. It helps the translator to have at least a guide to know how to translate a particular text. Hence, another proponent, Eugene Nida, views translation scientifically, and it focuses on the need of translators to consider certain aspects such as the accuracy and equivalence. Also introducing the three stages system of translation, composing the source text, analysis, transfer, restructuring, and the target language or the target text. For instance, these theorists have all highlighted the importance of careful considerations and analysis throughout the translation process. And for the reference, I have utilized Mundi J. 2008, Introducing Translation Studies, London and New York, Routledge, and also cited Leader M, encompassing the notions about the three interpretative model of translation. And that concludes my discussion on the process of translation. Thank you.